Welcome to the Primetime Training Podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Baher, and today we have an amazing guest, Coach Brian Kula. Coach Kula has over 20 years experience training and developing athletes and is a certified strength and conditioning specialist. He has trained many professionals, the most famous being Christian McCaffrey. In college, he was an All-American wide receiver for Northern Colorado and was inducted into their Hall of Fame in 2014. He is the owner and founder of Kula Sports Performance, with multiple locations in Colorado and one in Texas. Coach Kula, welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. I had Tony Holler on last time, and he had great things to say about you, gave me your contact information, and here we are. So thanks for hopping on.
Tony's my guy. Shout out to Tony Holler.
Yeah, he's great. So start off, in the world of sports performance, what separates you from other trainers in this field?
It's a field full of really smart people, and guys and gals that do this really well. I guess probably what separates me a little bit is I come from a team and an educational coaching background, and kind of moved into the private sector later in my career. And so, my philosophies are all centered around speed, and kind of being a speed-based performance program. So we've kind of taken a model of making people fast and turned it into an entire training system. And a lot of those philosophies cross over into the weight room and a lot of the things that we do. We just feel like it's the number one KPI for athleticism is speed. And I think that's probably where, Tony and I hit it off, and Les Spellman and some of these guys out there that are, speed gurus. I don't know if that separates me, but I think it's what maybe makes us a little bit unique, because we do prioritize it. I think we also put, emphasis on triplanar movement, and tissue resiliency, and we really kind of deep dive into things that are going to keep athletes healthy, which at the end of the day is the most important thing. You can make athletes strong and, bigger and whatnot, but if they're not healthy and can't stay on the field or the court, then they're no good. So I think that's a little bit of maybe what either separates us or defines us a little differently.
Yeah, no, Tony was definitely along the same lines. When I was talking with him, he said that like the foot is the most, the most underrated part of the human body in regards to sprinting. So do you train the feet or arches in like a specific way?
Yeah, no, we do. And I totally agree with that. In regards to, even when we teach speed, we start at the ground, and work up, which is a little bit different than how some people go about it. And so the force application and the mobility of the foot and being able to push through the big toe and maximize all the force outputs is a really big deal to us. And we do train it. We utilize the blackboard quite a bit, which is a modality piece that we keep in our gym for our athletes to use so they can, foot mobilize and activate. We use it with all of our athletes, not just our speed, track and field athletes, but we use it with football players and basketball players, and to mobilize the forefoot and the heel, and even stuff that's affecting people's knees often is because of an immobile foot. So we do a lot of that. We have rock mat that we use to kind of stimulate the foot. Similar kind of stuff, lacrosse balls and things like that, just to get the feet woke up and moving. We have some ankle complex strengthening kind of stuff, which kind of extends, from the foot up into the ankle complex. That we work on for strengthening, and then a fair amount of barefoot training when appropriate, just depending on, I'm not a barefoot all the time guy, but I think there's time and place for like our locomotion series or times to lift heavy in bare feet to kind of strengthen the feet. So I think we focus and concentrate on the foot a lot.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'll have to look up those, the black box you said.
Blackboard.
Okay. Yeah.
Blackboard.
But
it's
no,
a little secret tool.
Yeah. Who came up with it?
It's actually made in Germany. We're a distributor here in the U.S. And I was turned on to it by a chiropractor out in North Carolina, Nevin Markle, who is a good friend of mine, and we've done some work on a couple athletes together. And it really helped me because I had an ankle replacement and had some immobile, as you can imagine, with a titanium ankle. And it really actually helped me a ton. And so we started using it with some athletes. And now we've just found that in general, for an athlete to mobilize their foot prior to working out, we get a lot more bang for our buck.
Yeah, when you're talking about mobilizing, do you mean like ankle pronation?
Yeah, pronation, supination.
Or
Yeah, we put the heel in a stable position and then move the forefoot and then vice versa. Just to get the thing moving properly where, you're in a shoe all day, your foot gets how to move on its own a little bit. And so we got to get that thing woke up and ready to go for training.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm kind of a junkie about the foot, and I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I have a lot of opinions about it. So
sure.
could you walk me through the Bounce Fire series and like some of the finer points of it? Because I've seen that's like something that you came up with, or
Yep.
you said you kind of came up with it in one of the videos, but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's anything that's, I think we feel like it's a little bit proprietary to us, but it's something that I took from a trainer, Vince Stevenson, with Movement Training Systems back in the day. I mean, we're talking 25 years ago. His daughter actually works for me now, Julie Haley. So we kind of got to speak the same language of really just learning how to push through the foot properly. We kind of came up with a progressive series of how to teach that properly. So we start the bounce series is really just a foot activation, learning how to load and push through the foot. So obviously dorsiflexion is a key term to all trainers worldwide, nothing new. But how do you coach that, and how do you cue up somebody to hold dorsiflexion for as long as possible so they have a loaded foot when they strike the ground? And it's applicable to all sports. I mean, I work with some, basketball guys and, who are typically toe pointers. They're a little prancy in their run. And once we teach them how to be flexed in their foot, they're amazed at how fast they can change direction, how much higher they can jump because they're coming from a loaded foot, and how much quicker they can get off the ground. And then in sprinting, obviously it's paramount, to have a loaded foot, have it strike under your hip, and then be able to push through at just the right time. And so we feel like the bounce series of it not only teaches the proper mechanics of sprinting and movement, but it also then you're talking about thousands to millions of ground contacts over time that creates ankle stiffness, power output, all the things that you'd want to see in almost a low level plyometric type work. We do that on a daily basis with our athletes. And so almost in a case study over the last 30 years of doing that with athletes, we have kids get really fast and jump really high. And whether we're doing squats or cleans or deadlift or, all the other things, the one constant has always been our Bounce Fire series. And I've always said, if I had to be, put out in a desert somewhere and all I could do was Bounce Fire, we could still develop athletes.
wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you talked about like basketball players kind of being prancing on their toes, and then you do the Bounce Fire series. Are you trying to get more to the midfoot then during this?
Yeah, the strike should be midfoot always. We want a good dorsiflexed foot. We want that, as the foot's coming down to strike in a down back movement, kind of that negative foot speed that we talk about, then we want it to strike in a loaded position on the midfoot. So not on the heel, obviously. And some people, when they first start, it looks as if they're landing on their heel, but we're literally cueing and coaching the athletes to stay dorsiflexed as long as possible. I got to spend time with Dan Paff, 5-8 years ago, and I can't remember how long it was, but he had some philosophies of, you should drill holding dorsiflexion the entire way, because we're always going to come out of it a little early naturally. And so by drilling it and cueing it to stay flexed is really critical just for muscle memory.
Gotcha. And you mentioned you do this every day.
Bounce Fire is really one of our kind of non-negotiable daily training regimen. Mm-hmm. So we have a linear series, we have a lateral series, we have a change of direction series. So it usually plugs into I'd say post, temperature raise, we do a little bit of activation, mobilization stuff. And then we're usually right into Bounce Fire series as a lead into whatever speed theme we're working on that day.
Okay. So you're fine with like any sort of light plyos every day just to get like
Yeah,
your
and
springiness.
and plyos, I mean, as you know, right, there's levels of plyos that go from,
Hmm.
low level rudiment series plyometrics all the way up to a extreme depth drop of 6 feet, and then there's everything in between. So when I say plyometric work, a light bounce series, we can do that daily. Just like we do our isometric work with our ankles, we do that every day. It's not to an intensity level where they're going to have fatigue, but it does definitely cause some adaptation, in that of being able to push through that foot, which is all we're really after.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned isometrics. I was just going to ask, you incorporate isometrics in your training, and like what type of isometrics, like really heavy loading? Is it something you do often?
Yeah, I mean, isometrics is a part of our daily routine. Like I said, we're big spring ankle complex, environment. So we'll run athletes through that almost on a daily basis as a pre-workout, intra workout. Just depending. A lot of these questions oftentimes are kind of loaded because there's
Mhm.
so much. What is the goal of the session? What time frame of the season are you in? Is it preseason, postseason, in season? Do we do definitely have a layer of periodization to loading an isometric as we go. A lot of times it's just an activation, or it's hey, we've done a lot of mobilization and now we're getting ready to sprint. We want to kind of tighten the system back up. So let's hit some isometrics to tighten that back up before we sprint. We utilize them in a lot of different ways. I think at the end of the day, what we love about them is they're low hanging, right? You don't need equipment. They're low cost. We don't get a lot of soreness or fatigue out of them. And we're recruiting fast twitch muscle. It's you have to explain to athletes, hey, you're sitting still, you're not doing anything, but your muscles are actually moving so fast. You're having the synapses have to happen so fast to hold that isometric that it's almost like sprinting, whereas the muscles are the synapses are happening so fast that you're creating that fast twitch recruitment. So there's I think sometimes there's misnomer about what isometrics are used for. Obviously you can use them for strength, you can use them for again, the speed work, and then also just the stiffness of the joint is also very important. We don't want to be hypermobile as speed and power athletes. We want to have a little bit of punch to us when we touch the ground.
Yeah. I've never heard it explained like that with the synapses and neurons firing all at the same time.
Yeah,
Have you heard of Dr. Keith Barr?
I've never heard of Dr. Keith Barr.
Okay. I listened to a podcast, him and Joel Smith, and he was talking about isometrics and how they can be used for like tendon health. And
Sure.
so I was wondering if that's probably part of why you use
100%.
isometrics.
Yep. And again, I think even, PTs and ATCs are using isometrics a lot for injury rehab, return to play stuff. We get athletes that have, patella tendonitis. We're probably prescribing some lunge iso holds,
Mhm.
things like that to help the tendon health. And yeah, that's all part of it. And that's why I say it's kind of a loaded question. I think isometrics can be used in, several different facets of training.
Yeah, I agree. If you had to pick, what are some go-to exercises in the weight room that you would pick?
Easy question for me to answer. And it's one question. That's deadlift.
Deadlift?
Yep. I'm a big deadlift guy. It doesn't mean I'm not other exercises guy, but I think I should probably first explain a little bit of movement for us is priority one. The weight room is a support mechanism to speed. And so the things that we do in the weight room need to mimic and match what we do when we move. And when we run, we want ground-based, right, type activities. I don't love to load the spine if we don't have to. Once in a while, you got to put a bunch of weight on your back to do a box squat or a pin squat or whatever as a progressive bilateral movement. But deadlift for us is, gosh, it's easy to teach. We get high proficiency out of athletes with the first time they try it versus, I taught weight training for 16 years in a weight room. I saw thousands of kids, and I can tell you that half of them couldn't squat properly the first 6 months of their career. And what I learned was, square peg, round hole, we can get almost the same thing accomplished with a deadlift as we could with a squat and eliminate the spinal loading and the knee pain and the back pain and the poor form. So to me, if you, again, give me bounce fire series and a deadlift bar and I'm golden with an athlete. I really feel like we can get a lot done there. It hits 7 major muscle groups and, we're pushing into the ground, which again is that force application of speed. So it mimics very much what we prioritize in our movement.
Mm-hmm. Do you push through the forefoot or the heel?
Just through a flat foot. I
Okay.
coach as if you had on football cleats. We want all 7 football cleats touching the ground at the same time. And we're pushing up through the foot equally. It's not an explosive movement for us. It's a slow elevator ride is what I call it, up and down. And so oftentimes we'll drop it from the top to eliminate the eccentric movement, depending on our goals and time of the year and who we're training. But it is not, at the top, we're not exploding at the top or anything. Now there's variations of that deadlift with a deadlift bar jump or, split stance deadlift and stuff like that. But as far as, for us establishing a force index number, which is kind of that mass specific force model, we just want to know how much weight you can pick up comparative to your body weight. And that tells us a lot about how much force output you're going to be able to have on the ground.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So you've been doing this longer than I've been alive, but what's one aspect of training? It can be like a type of exercise or a concept, but what's one aspect that you wish you knew when you were first starting out?
Oh man, I just think that the general concept of training as an athlete versus, I know exactly what I want to say. I'm not exactly sure how I know how to say it. Some of the linear periodization stuff that you were taught in school and that we read about in most books that are written about training principles, frankly, to know that there's the ability to move away from that stuff and still get great accomplishment with an athlete is the one piece of information that I wish I would have had. I probably spent 15 years of my career feeling like I had to fit into a mold of, sets and reps and volume and all those things, where what I really learned is, man, we were probably doing too much with athletes, I had a great conversation with a basketball coach, in fact, today. And I told him, I said, coaches think, Friday night, we kind of had a letdown in the fourth quarter. We got a little fatigued and tired. So what do they do on Monday at practice? They go run the dog piss out of them, right? Well, probably what the reality is they were probably fatigued and tired in the fourth quarter, not out of shape. Mm-hmm. And so they go back and what do? They kick the dog while it's down and they run it even further into a state of fatigue. And now you're just moving backwards in your ability to perform well under some load, which is, quarters or time or whatever. So I just think that, those are things that just some of us grew up with. You got tougher by running a lot. I mean, we used to run 3 or 4 miles worth of sprints at practice on Monday in football when I was in high school. Looking back, we were operating under constant fatigue. I probably never even came close to my ceiling of output as I would have had I trained myself now.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I think those are the things that I wish I would have known. And guys like Tony and Dan and, all these guys that have been in the field for so long and figured things out and made mistakes have really now come upon, it's even hard to get coaches out of that mold. And to get an athlete to understand that, hey, not being able to walk out of the weight room is not a good workout. That's the worst workout in the world. As a high performance athlete, that might be great for a bodybuilder or a CrossFit athlete or something like that. And there's place in the world for those things too, but not for a high performance athlete.
Yeah, no, that's just something I've been learning the past couple of years, I'd say, just to not overdo it, but still get like maximum gains, like I'm the type of guy that just I'll work till I'm dead, and then sleep really good and then do it again the next day. And so I'm trying to get out of that mold a little bit more, like you were saying.
Well, and if you can go, you go. I mean, I was a decathlete, so, training as a decathlete for 7-8 years was, 4-hour training sessions, 6 days a week. Sometimes it was necessary, you kind of have to train for 10 events. So I was a product of that, and I had some success. I moved pretty well. I was pretty fast. I had some of those things. So it's not that it's the end all be all, but I think we've learned enough to know that we might be able to accomplish the same, if not a little better, by doing a little bit less and ensuring happiness, healthy, Tony's deal, happy, healthy athletes. I adhere to that 100%. And if you can keep those guys healthy, they got a chance. We do plenty with them, especially when you're competing against what the sport is doing with them, right? I'm the trainer. I'm getting this person ready for their activity, and their activity coach, their sport coach, is doing, 10 times more than they need to be doing.
Yeah.
So the last thing I need to do is heap on, with a bunch of volume or capacity work. So we really do have to adhere to our philosophies of less is more.
Yeah, less is more. That's good. So I have a younger sister, and I've been learning, and I've tried to train her this past summer a little bit. So my question to you is, what should one prioritize when training younger kids? Like, let's say the age elementary to junior high, maybe early high school.
Speed.
Speed.
Speed, I think, is the answer. I'd love to debate that with somebody of, it's really like the mechanics of speed, the mobility of speed, the strengthening, ankle stiffness, all the things that you can do from sprinting have so many athletic quality carryover. But it's also, you're never too young to run fast. Yeah. Right. We can sit here and argue about, when do you start deadlifting somebody? When do you start squatting somebody? When do you start overload, principles with athletes? But you can never argue. I mean, kids, when they're 5 years old on the playground, they race. So, it's never too young to do that. You have little to no risk of injury, especially with younger kids. They don't need any warm-up time. You can take a 10-year-old out with no warm-up, and they could run a 40-yard dash, like full speed without any injury risk. It's incredible. I wish my body was built that way. It's also fun for them. And it's really the most challenging thing you can do for your central nervous system is to sprint. And so you've taken and checked, 8 out of 10 boxes for all training, complexes by sprinting a kid. So speed, 100% speed with younger athletes all the time. We run our kids in here. We have some alpha programming with 5 to 8 year olds, and, watching them run a fly 10 or a 0 to 20 it's just joy, pure joy.
Gotcha. Yeah. I've had her doing some sprints this summer and had her like holding stuff above her head and doing things with her arms. So it's
great.
fun. It's fun.
You're hitting the mark. That's it.
Yeah. Kind of to go along with that. So as you're developing, like, what is the best sport in your opinion to play to increase overall athleticism?
I think all sports have a level of coordination and athletic abilities. I think sports that involve running, and maybe have a little bit less skill development, like a sport like soccer, for example. Now, soccer is very skilled. Soccer players out there, don't crucify me. But I mean, at a young age, it's very much about running around and having some capacity, and the fastest kid's probably going to have the most goals, kind of a thing. Love soccer for young kids, love gymnastics for young kids, of body awareness, balancing, mobility, strength, body weight strength. I think those are great places to start an athlete. And then some of the sports that I love, right? Football and baseball and, lacrosse and different things like that. But I think at some level, the skill involved with those sports are going to take away from just the general athletic development. Yeah. And so I love some of those sports. I was never really much exposed to martial arts. But what I know now as a trainer, looking back, those might've been pretty good places to put kids into of a just general athletic development type stuff when they're younger. Mm-hmm. So I think that'd be my answer. I always say gymnastics first, because gymnastics is just such the purest form of, your strength to weight, strength to weight ratios. mobility, flexibility, all those things that I think, kids need.
Yeah, I agree with gymnastics and martial arts,
Yeah.
100%. I just think you look like as a kid, you want to try as many different sports as possible, and get your, I don't know, all your movement patterns down, try new ones all the time, get your brain going. So it's really good.
That's really the answer is, play 4 or 5 sports,
Yeah.
do one in the fall, one in the summer, one. I mean, it was great. When I was in middle school, you used to be able to play 4 sports. They broke it up into 4 seasons instead of 3. And so I was able to play football, wrestle, play basketball, and then run track. And so I kind of got exposed, to a lot of different sports as a young athlete. And I really do think that helped my personal athleticism. And nowadays it's sad because, when you're 6, if you make 2 jump shots in a row, now you're on an AAU team that's pointed towards the U.S. national team, and they're going to lock you into basketball year round. You don't get exposed to all those different things, which I think hurts in some regards. Now, I think in other regards, once you get to a certain age, a level of specialization is probably necessary nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm talking young, I'm talking 5 to 8 years old. I would love to see athletes get, exposed to a lot of different things, and, the hand-eye coordination and the balance, stability, and mobility that they might not get, if they just focused on football or baseball.
Yeah, I agree. That's something I kind of regret in high school. I just played basketball, but I think I may have missed out on some of the other sports, even hanging with your friends and stuff. That's a big part of it too. So,
yeah. And it should be fun, right? I mean, I think, I don't know. I didn't do it. So at what level does playing basketball, every day of every year for 5 years start to get where it's not as fun anymore? I don't know, because I didn't really do that. I always felt like, man, I was really excited to play football in the fall because I just came out of 3 other seasons and I was chomping at the bit for football. And I think that's a good place to be for athletes until they have to make that choice or decision, to be singular athlete.
Yeah, I agree. I saw on your website you have a pretty nice recovery facility, and that led me to ask this question: do you implement heat or like cold for recovery, or for a particular adaptation?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think recovery is important, and we prioritize it. We try to prioritize it. It's not necessarily something that we take athletes through on our own. It's a service that we'll provide for them or let them use. I think some of it's preference. There's obviously the huge move right now in science and research around cold plunging. I mean, I remember days where, I spent half my life in a cold whirlpool, after track workouts in college. And, but yet heat is something for me that tends to work better, feel better. I think a lot of it is personal. What do you like? What makes you feel better? And then obviously compression, big compression of getting the blood moving, gravity stuff's going to pool in your legs. We want to flush that out and get going for the next day. I think saunas are great ways to detox and, limit inflammation. I think inflammation is the one thing that we're fighting as athletes all the time. So all those things that I mentioned there have a level of anti-inflammation. Even in a cold tub, if you contrast it with hot, so cold, hot tub back and forth is going to create higher blood flow, some restriction, some expansion, and get the blood flowing and moving, which is going to take some of that inflammation and toxins out of your body. So I think any and all, or a combination of those, are all probably pretty important for recovery.
Gotcha. So you're high altitude in Colorado.
Yeah.
How has that, say you bring in an athlete from a different, state, how does that affect the athlete at the start? And then how do you see them, I don't know, adapting and getting better because of the altitude?
Sure. Well, I mean, the first couple of weeks can be kind of rough, right?
Yeah.
And even just warm up will put them, bent over on their knees. But typically athletes are, they're fit, their lung capacity is already pretty good. Like they get through that and can kind of figure that piece out. I think by training in it for a significant period of time, we're talking, an NFL combine or, a 6-week training session or whatever, then your body's going to have adaptation. I mean, that is why many world-class runners come to Boulder or Crested Butte to train here, is after time, their body starts to produce more red blood cells. Right. Mm-hmm. And so then you go back down to altitude and you actually have a higher capacity for it to carry oxygen. So there are, I guess, physiological benefits to training at altitude. Do we see it on a day-to-day basis? I don't think we see that. It's scientific that you can run a little faster and jump a little higher up here at altitude. So I know when I was coaching a couple of world-class sprinters back in the day, we'd have some college coaches that wouldn't necessarily want to recruit the kids out of Colorado because they knew their times were going to get a little slower coming down into the thick air of, Texas, Florida, wherever. So there is definitely a disadvantage at some level that way. But as far as, being ready and having a little extra capacity when you go back down to sea level, pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to train up there. That'd be cool. Now I got a couple questions about McCaffrey specifically.
Okay.
So when you compare him to some of the other athletes you train, like non-professionals, is there a specific difference that like sets him apart, such as ankle stiffness or glute recruitment?
There's lots of things that separate Christian from other athletes, as you can imagine. I think just from physical attributes, of like what did God gift him with differently. There are some athleticism pieces, whether it's just hand-eye coordination or athletic abilities that he has that I don't see in not just general population athletes, but even in other professional athletes that I work with. His ability to consume information and execute is higher than anyone I've ever worked with. So, if I tell him to do X, he's going to do X and he's going to do it perfectly the first time I tell him to, which, is very efficient when it comes to, developing that skill or that, attribute. So I think his ability to consume that stuff is crazy. As far as just like his musculature and, you mentioned, glute activation and ankle stiffness stuff. I think he's probably above average in every single category in the books in regards to that kind of stuff. But, really, really at the end of the day, what separates Christian from all other athletes is his mental approach and his execution of training. He does some of the very same things that I do with high school basketball players. But how he does them, how he goes about them, and then what he does outside of the training regimen, recovery, nutrition, sleep, all those things, you'd fall out of your chair if I told you how regimented and how disciplined he was to that regimen. And that really is the great separator in my mind of him. He's a phenomenal athlete. I'm blessed to work with him. I think we've done some really good things. We collaborate a lot on what we're doing to make sure that we're doing the right stuff. We've morphed and changed that over the 7 years I've got to work with him as a professional. And so, he's just different. He's different when it comes to the approach. And I see it a lot, even in other professional athletes, where I'm like, man, if you just did X, Y, and Z a little better, you'd see huge benefit, so.
Yeah. Oh, he's phenomenal. I love watching him.
Yeah.
I got a pretty interesting question now for you about him. Have you ever tried the exercise? It's called heel elevated towel curls. So you tried that with him?
No, we've never done it with him necessarily.
Okay. So it's like you raise your heel and you put all your pressure on the ball of the foot and then you just grab the towel.
Yep.
I think you should try that with him and email me back and tell me like what his response is, especially in the glutes and the abs. I'm curious. So
we do quite a bit of he's got the strongest feet. So you go back to physical attributes, he's probably got the strongest feet I've ever been around. He's just got these fat, big, strong, meaty feet. And we do a lot of spring ankle, flexed and extended foot isometric stuff. A lot of time on the blackboard, a lot of time doing proprioceptive work with kind of what you'd refer to as toe yoga. And so he's got a very strong foot. We do a lot of that kind of stuff. That specific exercise I've never done with him, but
you should try it. Let me know.
Okay.
If you want to, you don't have to. But now I just got like 3 little closing questions I always ask. So what is one book that has changed how you train or just how you live your life in general?
Can I say 2?
Yeah, you can say 2. Sure.
Underground Secrets to Running Faster by Barry Ross. It's a high school strength coach that wrote a book about how he trained Alice and Felix, and it really challenged some of my thinking in regards to training principles. And it's something I make every one of my staff members read. I've promoted it through the TFC and Tony and, a lot of these guys and JT Ayers out in California. In my opinion, for my career, it's been a life-changing book, and it's a short read. You could read it in a weekend. But it definitely challenges some things that are pretty cool. The other one, just for life, is Chop Wood, Carry Water. I think that book is one of the best books out there, just for life. I recommend it to a lot of teenagers that are heading off to college. Just, hey, read this, digest it, and then, try to live by it kind of. So I think those are probably my two go-tos books.
Thank you. Yeah, I try to read a lot, so that's why I asked.
Absolutely.
Who are some other coaches that I should look into and learn from, maybe that have affected you in some way?
Oh man, my list is long.
Yeah.
I was a lifelong learner from the time I was 23. I was always talking to coaches. Some of them aren't around any longer. They were older, and I got to learn from some of the best in the industry. But I think there's some young guys out there. I mean, JT Ayers out in California is one of the best speed coaches around. I'm sure Tony probably promoted him as well. He just does. He cares about kids. He's an awesome human and really does a good job of, constant learning and doing speed stuff. I think Les Spellman also is, one of the best in the industry of developing speed and putting programming together, also just data science side of things. There's the list goes on and on. I mean, Tony and I are good friends, and Jonas Dodu over in England, and Ryan Grubbs down with the Houston Texans is a sports science guy with a ton of knowledge. I mean, I could probably go on and on of the coaches that have impacted me. And if you want, I'll offline send you, who my mentors have been.
Please.
And stay tuned. We're going to put together a pretty special conference here in Denver, maybe next year, involving 15 to 20 of those people. So it could be a pretty cool deal. I don't want to say too much about it because we're not finalized yet.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of great people out there that I have stolen from, mentored, by. And, you just take little nuggets from each of them and you kind of formulate your own thing. But I think one thing I would say is don't ever stop asking for advice and picking the brains of others. And I mean, it was the other day I went out to do some consulting at a school in California. I called that guy back 4 months after the fact and said, hey, can you tell me what you were doing on your post-game recovery stuff? Because I really liked it and I'd like to learn more about it. And again, I say that because it's that growth mindset of you never know who's going to have something that's going to impact your career. And that was a situation where they had paid me to come out and consult for them.
Yeah.
So I mean, almost anyone I've ever talked to or done business with is a mentor of mine, because I don't hesitate to ask questions and, just humbly come to it of, hey, how can I learn from you a little bit? Obviously, you're doing something really well.
Yeah, that's something I would like to do. As many mentors as possible.
Absolutely.
And then finally, where can people find you online?
Our website is just kulasp.com. Is probably the best place where you can get a hold of us. So check that out. And we got some cool stuff in the works. So we got some new stuff coming.
Perfect. Well, thank you for hopping on. I'm very grateful and blessed to talk with you. So thank you.
It's great to meet you, my man. Good luck with everything. And make sure, are you going to put this up on any socials?
YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify.
Okay, cool. Just maybe tag us or something like that so we can help promote you.
For sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care, bud.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.